Thursday, 9 a.m. is already behind us. We have time to tell you about the most important news. The television news service is at your attention. While you're watching this broadcast, don't forget to like and comment. Ballistics, cruise missiles, and attack drones. Russia has launched a massive strike on Ukraine. In Zaporizhzhia, a dormitory was hit. It is known that 11 people were injured. Among the wounded are 6 children, 3 girls, and 3 boys. The children are between 3 and 6 years old, according to Ivan Fedorov, head of the Zaporizhzhia military administration. Several floors of the dormitory have been destroyed and rescuers are clearing the rubble. Residential buildings and infrastructure facilities in Zaporizhzhia have also been damaged. In the Kyiv region, the enemy attacked Boryspil with strike drones. A young woman was seriously injured. She was hospitalized in the local hospital with thermal burns and lacerations, according to Mykola Kalashnik, head of the Kyiv Regional Military Administration. In Boryspil, as a result of the enemy attack, a private house caught fire, cars burned, and windows were blown out in apartment buildings. By early morning, the Russians launched missiles at the western regions of Ukraine. Explosions were heard in Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv, Vinnytsia, and other regions. Ukrenergo reports a massive missile and drone strike on the energy infrastructure. Emergency power outages have been introduced in most regions. Those who still have electricity are being asked to conserve it. The Russians have concentrated about 11,000 soldiers to encircle the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Some of the occupiers are trying to advance to the north and northwest of the city, but Ukrainian defenders are holding their positions. This was reported by the 7th Air Assault Corps. For more details on what is currently happening in Pokrovsk, special TSN correspondent Yulia Kirienko will provide further information. Cut it if you have the reel. Thank you, God.
This is how Russian drones hunt even civilian vehicles in Donetsk region. This is the entrance to Kostiantynivka, once a city of thousands, now just scorched earth. On the highway, a car is burning out, having been hunted down by an enemy drone, and another one speeds past it. The soldiers are hurrying to their positions. And as soon as they enter the city, another drone comes flying at them.
Wait, maybe they need help. They're alive.
A bit further from the frontline towns, the roads are draped with long corridors of nets. Yes, this is what almost all the highways look like now, in Donetsk region. Every day, these tunnels are getting longer and longer. In some places, the occupiers have increased the number of drones by up to 10 times. They attack moving vehicles, search for our equipment positions, set up ambushes right on the roads, even against infantry. They force people to leave their homes and disrupt logistics for our troops by cutting off all routes. Between the trenches, the front line and the rear. In the forest belt, among the dense trees, paratroopers are hiding an American APC. I'm inside the American Striker APC. The guys from the 82nd Brigade consider this vehicle the coolest they've ever worked with. It's all because of its strong armor and maneuverability. This vehicle saved dozens of people in Kherson, and it was this one that broke through. During the counterattack near Dobropilya, back then when the Russians hadn't yet managed to bring in so many of their strike drones, this vehicle repeatedly carried infantry into assaults, and always successfully.
We were advancing, and a column got hit, and then drones targeted us. An anti-tank guided missile was fired at us. 4 wheels were hit, but out of 8, we managed to drive out on 4.
It can hold up to 6 soldiers and safely deliver them to the drop-off point.
The machine gun is 12.7 caliber and it hits very hard too. In the morning, it is very well protected.
The powerful chassis allows it to handle any off-road conditions of war.
The vehicle is maneuverable, fast and good.
But this vehicle has just been hiding in the thickets for a month now. Because with the sheer number of Russian drones currently in the Dobropilya-Pokrovsk direction, you can only use it once.
Today it's the same story with it. The enemy doesn't give us the opportunity to use this equipment, so we're forced to use ATVs and buggies instead.
Or even cover dozens of kilometers on foot, like in this video published by the 25th Airborne Brigade. These are our pilots who, after a firefight in Pokrovsk, are trying to evacuate a wounded comrade while under constant fire. If near Dobropilya, our defense forces are having success. And even though our forces liberated the village of Suketske, the occupiers have brought in significant reinforcements to Pokrovsk, and Russian infantry have already been spotted deep within residential neighborhoods in the southwest near the railway. On the roof in Pokrovsk, our drones spotted the tricolor flag. Eventually it was shot down, but this means that the road to Mirnohrad is now at risk of being blocked, and there is a whole agglomeration of defense forces there. It is becoming increasingly difficult for our infantry to hold their positions in the trenches near the village of Lysivka. A similar situation is unfolding in the village of Novoekonomikne, which is near Mirnohrad. Supplying food and ammunition to our soldiers, even by drones, is already bordering on the impossible, according to the defense forces. And they are looking for ways to unblock their own.
In Kherson region, 11 people have been injured as a result of Russian shelling. The enemy struck the children's hospital in Kherson with artillery. Among the injured are 3 staff members, 4 children aged 8 to 16, as well as 2 mothers of young patients. The medical staff sustained injuries of varying severity, while the children suffered blast and shrapnel wounds. An employee of the district prosecutor's office was also wounded by the artillery shelling. And in Chornobaivka, the Russians dropped an explosive device from a drone on a local resident. The man was hospitalized with a shrapnel wound to the abdomen. 2 women were injured in Pavlohrad-Dnipropetrovsk region. There, as a result of Russian shelling, a kindergarten was damaged. Meanwhile, Nikopol district came under attack from enemy drones and artillery fire. 2 gas stations and 2 private houses were damaged. The enemy struck Sinelnikivsky district with guided aerial bombs. Infrastructure and housing were destroyed. An enemy train was blown up in Zaporizhzhia region, according to the main intelligence directorate. The explosion occurred on the tracks near Tokmak in temporarily occupied territory. As a result of a successful special operation by members of the Ukrainian resistance movement, a train loaded with military cargo was derailed. 1 locomotive, 3 railway platforms, and at least 9 freight cars of the enemy's military train were damaged. Russian logistics. In this section, it is paralyzed. About 70 meters of railway track have been damaged. You are watching TSN. To stay up to date with the main news, subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications. And now I continue with the news broadcast. 2 months in custody with the option of bail set at nearly 14 million hryvnias. The Pecherskyi court has chosen a preventive measure for the former head of Ukrenergo, Volodymyr Kudrytskyi. Kudrytskyi was detained in the Lviv region by officers of the State Bureau of Investigation. The State Bureau of Investigation stated that it suspects the former head of Ukrenergo of fraudulently misappropriating tens of millions of hryvnias from the state enterprise. In the same case, Lviv businessman Ivano-Frankivsk has also been charged. He is already in a pre-trial detention center in connection with a case about supplying substandard clothing to the military. According to the investigation, he was also the organizer of the scheme involving Ukrenergo. According to the State Bureau of Investigation, Kudrytskyi and Frankivsk may have embezzled funds from the state company that were allocated for the reconstruction of energy system facilities back in 2018. At that time, during the tenders for the reconstruction of the external fencing of substations in the southern and western energy systems, Kudrytskyi, who was then one of the managers at Ukrenergo, allegedly entered into agreements with representatives of Frankivsk's company. The contracts were worth over 68 million hryvnias. Of this amount, Ukrenergo transferred more than 13 million to the contractor. However, investigators claim that these funds were embezzled. The prosecution requested that Kudrytskyi be kept in custody for 2 months, arguing that as the father of 3 young children, he could easily leave the country. 4 members of parliament expressed their willingness to act as guarantors for the former head of Ukrenergo. One of them, Yaroslav Zhelezniak, explained that Kudrytskyi did not cause any losses to the state. After all, the tender was conducted under a bank guarantee, and when Hrynkiewicz's company failed to fulfill its obligations, the bank returned the advance payment to Ukrenergo. Polish fighter jets intercepted a Russian aircraft over the Baltic Sea. The local Armed Forces Command released a photo of the IL-20. According to the Poles, the aircraft did not violate Polish airspace. However, it entered international airspace to carry out a reconnaissance mission without filing a flight plan and with its transponder turned off. A pair of Polish MiG-29 fighter jets took off to intercept the Russian aircraft and escorted the Il-20 out. He rattled his saber and boasted about imaginary successes at the front. Against the backdrop of failed negotiations with the United States and new Western sanctions, Vladimir Putin, for the second time in the past 2 weeks, announced the testing of nuclear weapons. This time it was allegedly about the Poseidon underwater drone with a nuclear engine, although there is no evidence to support this. But the Kremlin dictator spoke about this at a meeting with patients of the Mandryk Central Military Clinical Hospital. According to him, the device was able for the first time to begin operating from its submarine carrier and to start up its nuclear power unit, which it uses for energy supply. In addition to saber-rattling, Putin began boasting to the military about illusory achievements on the front in Ukraine and about encirclements. Pokrovsk appealing to the Ukrainian authorities. In recent weeks, the Russian leader has regularly resorted to the tactic of threats. Just last week, Russia conducted a test of a cruise missile. With a nuclear power unit called Boryspil, Andase Dasibaya Desor. Obviously, such a show of force was aimed at an international audience and at the United States, with whom recent negotiations in Budapest fell through, and who, together with the EU, have imposed some of the most severe energy sanctions that will hit the Kremlin's oil market. The main source of power for their military machine. Donald Trump, responding to such moves by Putin, reminded everyone of America's powerful weaponry and advised the Russian leader to focus on ending the war in Ukraine instead of testing missiles. To work on bringing the war in Ukraine to an end. The reduction of the US military contingent will not affect the EU's defense projects. This is how the European Commission commented today on the news about the withdrawal of American troops from several Eastern European countries. A spokesperson for the agency stated that they will continue working on their flagship defense project, Eastern Flank Guard, which they plan to launch in the first quarter of next year. Brussels also clarified that they are currently working with various member states and Ukraine regarding their own defense. NATO stated that they are in close contact with Washington regarding troop deployments. An unnamed official told Reuters that today's decision did not come as a surprise to them. And even taking these adjustments into account, the number of US troops in Europe remains higher than it has been for many years. Overall, the US wants to withdraw about 800 of its soldiers from countries such as Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Hungary. This decision is driven by the new priorities of Donald Trump's administration regarding the reassessment of the global position of the US armed forces. In particular, the American side believes that other NATO countries have already strengthened their presence on the eastern flank, so supposedly there is no longer a need for their troops there. Romania assured that they were aware of this decision in advance and clarified that a certain number of American troops will still remain in the country.
The reassessment of the position is part of a broader strategy announced by the US at the beginning of the year. During the meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels, Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of Defense, once again informed European partners that now, as Europeans have strengthened their positions on the eastern flank and in Europe as a whole, and have agreed to better arm themselves, they will pay more attention to their own defense. The United States, in turn, will focus more attention on Indo-Canadian culture and the Pacific region. Approximately 1,000 American military personnel will remain in Romania, contributing to the deterrence of any threats and serving as a guarantee of the United States' commitment to regional security.
She said yes. Taras Levkovych, a fighter of the Special Rifle Unit of the National Police Corps, proposed to his beloved Viktoria Opryshko. This happened in a hospital room at the Lviv UNBROKEN Center, where the fighter is undergoing rehabilitation. He didn't choose the date for the proposal by chance. A year ago, on October 29th, they started dating. They met on TikTok, started chatting, and saw each other for the first time when Taras came home on leave. Over this year, they have experienced both unconditional happiness and terrible trials. In August, the man was injured by a landmine, lost both legs, suffered kidney failure, and underwent hemodialysis. Viktoria literally moved into the hospital so she could be by her beloved's side at all times. Within a week, Taras Levkovych was already able to sit up in bed on his own, and 2 days later, he transferred to a wheelchair and began rehabilitation. Taras believes that he will fully recover and walk on prosthetics. He says that when his beloved is by his side, he can do anything.
There are no words to describe it. I didn't expect it.
At this moment, that was the last message. Don't miss our upcoming TCH broadcast to stay up to date with the news.